Right. Can everybody hear me? Good morning.
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavara Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Janavara Girivaradari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Vanjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Vanjana Yamuna Tira Vancha Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hari Krishna Hari Krishna 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 Hari 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 Rama Hari Rama Ramo Ramo Hari 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 Krishna, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Ramo, Hari Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari. Hari Ramo, Hari Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Ramo, Hari Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hari Hari. Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Kirati Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Kirati Jaya Goranitai Goranitai Jaya Goranitai Jaya Goranitai Jaya Goranitai Goranitai Jaya Goranitai Jaya Goranitai Jaya Gurudeva 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 Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Haribo Gora Haribo Haribo Gora Haribo Nitrato Haribo Gora Haribo Haribo Gora Haribo Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to the Srimad Bhagavatam class. We're reading from Canto 7, Chapter 12, Text 10. Kalpayit fit atmat atmana yadva vaya abhasam idam ishvaraha dvaitam tavam na virame tatahi asya vipayaya kalpavit kalpayit vit atma yadva abhasam idham ishvaraha dvaitam tavam na virama tato hi asya viparaya kalpavit atmanam vyayad apsam idham adham ishvaraha dvatam itavam naviramat tato hi asya vipayaya. Would anyone like to try the verse?
Kalpayatat banat yavad apasam itamishvaraha dvaitam tavad naviramit tato yasya viparyayaha.
कल्पयित्वात्मना यावत् आभासमिदमीश्वर द्वैतं तावन्न विरमेत् ततो ह्यस्य विपर्यय.
Anyone else? Thank you. Okay, word for word translation. Kalpayitva, ascertaining positively. Atmana, by self-realization. Yavat, as long as. Abhasam, reflection of the original body and senses. Idam, this, the body and senses. Ishvaraha, completely independent of illusion. Dvaitam, duality. Tatvat, for that long. Na, does not. Viramat, see. Tata, by such duality. He, indeed. Asya, of the person. Viparyaya, counteraction. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. As long as a living entity is not completely self-realized, as long as he is not independent of the misconception of identifying with his body, which is nothing but a reflection of the original body and senses, he cannot be relieved of the conception of duality, which is epitomized by the duality between man and woman. Thus, there is every chance that he will fall down because his intelligence is bewildered. Purport. Here is another important warning that a man must save himself from attraction to woman. Until one is self-realized, fully independent of the illusory conception of the material body, duality of man and woman must undoubtedly continue. But when one is actually self-realized, this distinction ceases. Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmanaya Gavi Hastini Shuni Chaiva Shvarpakecha Panditata Samadashan. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater. Outcast. That's Bhagavad Gita 5:18. On the spiritual platform, the learned person not only gives up the duality of man and woman, but also gives up the duality of man and animal. This is the test of self-realization. One must realize perfectly that the living being is spiritual soul, but is tasting various types of material bodies. One may theoretically understand this, but when one has practical realization, then he actually becomes a pandit, one who knows. Until that time, the duality continues, and the conception of man and woman also continues. In this stage, one should be extremely careful about mixing with women and consequently with men. No one should think himself or herself perfect and forget the Shastric instruction that one should be very careful about associating, even with his daughter, mother, or sister, not to speak of other women. Srila Madhavacharya cites the following shlokas in this regard. Banutat Vineva Vashtunam Yatartat Gyananam Uchyate Advaita Gyananam Iti Etad Dvaita Gyanam Tad Antyata Yatad Gyanam Tattva Vashtu Yata Vashtas Tattva Mati Naiva Gyanatorya Vedas Tata Ekatva Vedanam. Unity in variety is real knowledge, and therefore giving up variety artificially does not reflect perfect knowledge of monism. According to the Achinta Beda Abheda philosophy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there are varieties, but all of them constitute one unit. Such knowledge is knowledge of perfect oneness. The translation again. As long as a living entity is not completely self-realized, as long as he is not independent of the misconception of identifying with his body, which is nothing but a reflection of the original body and senses, he cannot be relieved of the conception of duality, which is epitomized by the duality between man and woman. Thus, there is every chance that he will fall down because his intelligence is bewildered. Meganantamarandasya Janachakshaya Chaksho Militanyana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sampitami and Bhutale Swayam Lupa Garamayam Bhadadam Bhadadikam. Nama Vishnu Badaya Krishna Vishtaya Bhutale Shmata Bhakti Tirtha Swami Tamamine. Namaste Krishna Badaya Prabhupada Arastavamane Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Bhakti Tirtha Tinamine. Nama Vishnu Badaya Krishna Vishtaya Bhutale Shmata Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tamamine. Namaste Saraswati Deva Gauravani Pacharine Nivashesha Shandavari Prashna Tattva Shatavani. Okay. I don't know. It seems like Krishna's really picking these verses for me. When I first looked at this verse, the first thing that sprang to mind was this the talking about duality, and of course, immediately whenever I hear that word duality or non-duality, or whatever, I immediately go to um, the understanding um, of duality versus non-duality, the impersonalists and the Mayavadis and the Vaishnavas and the I remember Srila Prabhupada's pranam Sundarvadi that he came um, to to destroy this conception of impersonalism, destroy this conception of Mayavadi conception of monism. So I thought that's where this was going. I kind of prepared myself with the historical um, his chronological progression from um, the Buddhist conception of oneness and how Buddha came to reset the whole understanding of our information from the Vedas to Ramanujacharya to Madhavacharya to Lord Chaitanya, as it's explained in the Vedas here. So that's where I thought it was going. But then um, but then there's so many things to unpack in this, so I thought I would just go through my understanding of this verse um and it's really taking us, because this whole idea of duality within the Srimad Bhagavatam didn't make sense, because if you're reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, we understand what our actual constitutional position is. And so this whole idea of duality in this monism and dualism conception is not actually what Srila Prabhupada is getting to here. So let's start with the definition of duality: the state of having two different, opposite, or complementary parts. So that can be in anything, in ideology, in physicality, in whatever. That's the definition of dualism. So let's unpack each of these statements in um, in this in this verse. Um, as long as a living entity is not completely self-realized, as long as he is not independent of the misconception of identifying with his body. So self-realization is the realization that we are spirit souls in a material body. That's basically the the statement, is that that is the point that we need to get to, that we have to properly conceive of who we are and where we are, that we're a spiritual entity and we're occupying a material body. So he says, as long as we have this misconception, which is nothing but a reflection of the original body and senses, he cannot be relieved of the conception of duality. So in our contaminated state, we have a sarupa, a spiritual body, and our spiritual selves, which we are not able to understand, because we're contaminated by our association with material energy. So being relieved of the conception of duality is this idea that we are all separate entities, not the duality of non-duality of Shankaracharya, but of this understanding that we are all separate entities. So this idea of we're all in different material bodies, we're all separate entities. This is a tasmasic understanding of who we are and where we are. So it goes on to say, he cannot understand he cannot be received the conception of duality, which is epitomized by the duality between man and woman. Thus, there is every chance that he will fall down because his intelligence is bewildered. So, um, I'm reading through this, the translation and the verse. My first thing is that where did man and woman come in? Because if you look at the translation, there is no direct indication of, of the sexes so I was thinking, why did Srila Prabhupada translate this particular verse? Why did he translate it this way in talking about the duality between man and woman? So this duality between man and woman is an illusory appearance persisting through the identification of the self with the body, projecting the unreal as real. So these material bodies that we have, because they're temporary, they're classified as unreal, but we are looking at them as real. We are looking at them as the be all and end all. But this emphasis on man and woman, it really brings to the fore this understanding of what entangles us in this false narrative, what entangles us in this perception of thinking that this illusory energy is actually real, that this body is real, that our journey through this material energy is simply an opportunity to satisfy our own senses. What is it that keeps us entangled in this mindset? And Krishna clearly talks about this in the Bhagavad Gita when Arjuna asks about this same question: what keeps us entangled in this material energy? What keeps us striving for the things that are not important? And Krishna says it is lust only, Arjuna. And again, when in the fourth, um, chapter, when Krishna is describing the fall down into this material energy while contemplating the object of the senses. And so, in my understanding, Srila Prabhupada has used this example of the interaction between men and women in this material world to define this lusty nature, this this energy, the strongest energy that Maya has over us, the illusory energy Maya has over us is the sex energy. This wanting to connect with the opposite sex is one of the strongest forces in this material world. And if we can break free from this particular force, then 90% of our work is done. 95% of our work is done. So um, so he's using this to really show us that the most entangling aspect of the illusory energy is sex energy, and being able to overcome that, not by theorized knowledge, because um, we can't understand the deepest aspects of spirituality simply by reading from books or theorizing or even speculating. The 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 path forward through spiritual knowledge is through realization, and um, realization really means that you have to be engaged in the process. It's kind of like when you're doing something and you're trying to figure out a puzzle, or trying to figure out a crossword puzzle, or whatever puzzle that you're trying to figure out. You're constantly going through like words and things, and then as all the pieces start to fit together through the action that you're engaged in, you have this what was it Archimedes called it? Like um a uh, an explosion of thought, an explosion, the aha moment that you that it all fits together, it all comes together, and that is the realization of the answer, the solution that you're actually trying to get to. And you can't get that simply through theorizing. You have to be engaged. Um, And again, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that in the fourth chapter. He says, if you want to learn the truth, you have to approach a spiritual master, somebody that's already seen the truth, somebody that can share that with you because they have already been through the process, been through the activities, and have had the realization of the truth, and that person can then share that with you. As he says here, Pandit, one who knows, one who has experienced and has acquired the knowledge, as Srila Prabhupada says in this purport, a pandita. So so this this information, this understanding, how to destroy this duality. So the duality that Srila Prabhupada is talking about here is not the duality, as I said, of the of the Mayavadis, of the impersonalists. It's the duality of thinking ourselves to be all separate entities rather than understanding that we are actually all spiritual entities. We are qualitatively all the same spiritual energy of Krishna. But we are reflected in these different bodies as we're having different bodily experiences. So I wanted to as Lord Chaitanya, like finish with what Lord Chaitanya taught at Achinta Beda Abeda Tattva, which is also mentioned here, that the inconceivable, simultaneous oneness and difference between God and all living souls. Lord Chaitanya accepted the reality of individual souls and the material world while affirming that they both originate and belong to the one Supreme Lord. So I was trying to think of a way of summing all of this up in so we could clearly understand what Srila Prabhupada is saying here, and also what our move forward is. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, The summary in chapter 28, I think, really encapsulates the understanding of this verse in a way that helps us to move forward. So I'm going to read it. It's a little lengthy, take a few minutes to read, but I think as we read through this summary of the 28th chapter, that we can really see how it answers all of the and puts into perspective and clarifies this particular verse. So this is a brief summary. Every created thing in this universe is a material product of the three modes of nature, is subject to sensory perception and is essentially unreal. Actually, the designations of good and bad that we assign to the various objects and activities of this world are all superficial. It is better to avoid condemning or praising anything of this world because doing so simply entangles one in matter and deprives one of the highest goals of spiritual life. Hidden within every object of the material universe is the spiritual soul, is the spirit soul, who underlies both the causes and products of manifest existence. One should see things in this light and thus move about the material world in a mood of detachment. As long as there is a relationship between the bodily senses, which are comprised of matter, and the soul, which is the reality, one will continue in false consciousness. Although material existence is unreal, those who lack discrimination remain entangled in the cycle of birth and death because of their absorption in sense gratification. All the phases of material life, such as birth, death, sorrow, and happiness, belong not to the soul, but to the materialistic false ego. By learning to distinguish between the soul and its opposite, matter, one can destroy this false identification. There is a single absolute truth present at the beginning and at the end of this world. During its interim or maintenance phase, the cosmic manifestation is also founded upon the same absolute truth. This absolute Brahman exists everywhere, both positively by its manifestations and negatively by its aloofness. Brahma is unique in being self-sufficient, whereas this world is the expansion of Brahma produced through the material mode of passion. By the mercy of a bona fide spiritual master, one can understand the absolute truth and come to appreciate the non-spiritual nature of the material body and its extensions. Desisting from engagement in material sense enjoyment, one then becomes satisfied in the ecstasy of the self, just as the sun remains untouched by the coming and going of clouds. The discriminating liberated person remains unaffected by the activities of his senses. Nevertheless, until one becomes perfectly fixed in bhakti yoga, pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord, one should carefully avoid contacting material sense objects. An aspiring devotee may meet various obstacles and fall down, but in his next life he will continue his practice by dint of what he has already accomplished in devotional service. He will never again become bound up by the laws of karma. The man who is liberated and established in discrimination will under no circumstances seek false enjoyment by indulging in material sense gratification. He knows that the soul is changeless and that any contrary conception imposed on the pure self is sheer illusion. If during the immature stage of spiritual practice one suffers physical disease or other disturbances, the Vedas enjoin that he should certainly take proper measure to eradicate the problem. Prescribed remedies for lust and the other enemies of the mind are meditation on the Supreme Lord and Sankirtan, the loud chanting of his names. The remedy for the disease of false ego is rendering service to the Supreme Lord's saintly devotees. By practicing yoga, some non-devotees keep their bodies youthful and fit, and may even achieve mystic perfections or long life. But these attainments are actually worthless because they are perfections only of the material body. An intelligent person is therefore uninterested in this kind of process. Rather, by taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, an aspiring devotee who is seriously dedicated to the Lord rids himself of all disturbances and becomes empowered to attain the highest perfection, the full bliss of spiritual life. Translation one more time is, as long as a living entity is not completely self-realized, as long as it is not independent of the misconception of identifying with its body, which is nothing but a reflection of the original body and senses, he cannot be relieved of the conception of duality, which is epitomized by the duality between man and woman. Thus, there is every chance that he will fall down because his intelligence is bewildered. So, if there are any questions, comments, or corrections, I would be very happy to. Oh, somebody's asking what verse am I reading from? What I just read from was actually the chapter summary of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, chapter 28. So that was the summary which I thought really explained this particular verse very nicely.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol, that's your Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, thank you for giving class. Always nice to hear from you. I'm, when I think of dualities, I think of like heat and cold, pleasure, pain, um, like fame, infamy. So how is it that these, what it say, how is it that like those dualities that I just stated and like, the dualities that we're all aware of, how is it that those are epitomized by, the male and female relationship? Seems like a very
Okay. I missed the last
impact.
part. Male, female, it seems like what?
It's the male. To say that they're all epitomized by the male and female interactions seems like an extreme statement. So I guess I'm wondering if you could elaborate more on that, like how all those things are epitomized by the male and female relationship.
Okay, so this is my thought process that yes, dualities, as I started with the definition of duality, the state of having two different opposite or complementary parts. So as you're correct, the pains, happiness, heat, colds, winter, summer. Bhagavad Gita asks us to tolerate all of these states. But these states only need to be tolerated because we think they're real. We think that all of these things that are happening in this material world is actually real when, because they are temporary, they they are by definition unreal. And the only thing that is real is anything that does not change, which is the spirit soul. So that's the first part, is that this duality is a symptom of our contaminated state. And why are we contaminated? Why are we in this material energy in the first place? It's a product of our um, our desire to enjoy our senses, our desire to experience um, this material world, which continues to bind us in this energy. And what is that? What is that pull to this material world is lust. And so, in my understanding, as I said earlier, the strongest energy in this material world, and you can clearly see that even through advertising, even through through, if you look at anything in this material world, the highest achievement is what people are striving for is sex energy. Whether it's how we dress, how we what we're trying to do in the world, we're trying to make ourselves the most attractive person by having money, having knowledge, having this, having that, whatever, so that we can attract the opposite sex. It's just an underlining foundation of this material world. And so Srila Prabhupada is using that attraction between man and woman to epitomize this lust energy, which keeps us entangled in this material world. That's how I understand it. I don't know if that helps. But
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. And I just something on this point I just thought about. Um, there's this brahmachari book, and in there it says that you know, talking about the influence that the opposite sex can have. You know, given an example of this, it was saying that even if you have a room of staunch so-called staunch strict brahmacharis, as soon as a lady walks in, they'll start thinking about like how do they look, how are the creases in their dhoti. So it just it's like immediately by that presence of the opposite sex, then all these dualities start coming into the minds of those brahmacharis.
right. Yeah. Um, I yes, completely. I definitely agree with you. The thing that concerns me a little bit, especially when I read something like this, because it took me a little while to, like I said, unpacking the statements, unpacking this, how understanding it, um, and seeing what the deeper point that Srila Prabhupada is trying to make here. If you just look at it on the surface, again, it seems as though we have this opportunity to kind of disqualify women and put them aside, and oh, this energy is so bad, butter and fire, we always have that analogy. But we can also see that it's an opportunity, especially if a couple is in both of them are engaged in bhakti yoga, that um just as we have this energy, and it says here that everything is a reflection of the spiritual world. So we could also have this energy be helping us to get out of this material world too. That and this is what the grahasta household ashram, the grahasta ashram is all about, is to have man and woman, the couple, help each other both get out of this material world by not by subduing the senses, but by redirecting that energy into service for Krishna. And I think that's really important, that we don't see everything can be used in Krishna's energy. Everything can be used in Krishna's service. So all this energy, even this energy that is so debilitating and entangling, can be used when it's properly channeled into service for Krishna. And that's kind of what it was saying at the end of the summary, that um, that an aspiring devotee who is seriously dedicated to the Lord rids himself of all disturbances and becomes empowered to attain the highest perfection. So if we stay full spiritual bliss, so if we stay focused on what the goal is, and I actually started this writing about this thing by saying, keep your eye on the sparrow, that keep your eye on the goal. What is the goal? The goal is to not just get out of this material world, but to actually get to a place where we can actually really enjoy. We want to enjoy. That's just part of the nature of the soul. Satchit Ananda. Ananda means bliss. We want to be blissful. We want to be happy, but we want to be happy forever. And that's the problem. In this material world, you can't be happy forever. There's going to be something that cuts that happiness. It doesn't matter whether you have the best relationship, whether you have the most beautiful body, you're in the wealthiest family, you have all of the riches that you want, you're satisfied, you're doing the thing that you want to do, death will take it away because it's not you. death takes away everything that is not you. And so if we really want to be happy, then we need to situate ourselves in a place where that happiness is not only eternal and ongoing and ever expanding, but it comes in such a variety of feelings and tastes and things that we're never satisfied. We're always, when I say never satisfied, is that we never get bored. We're always engaged in one blissful engagement after another, and that's the spiritual world. And so if we can help each other get to that point, that is the perfect arrangement. And not just man and woman, but soul to soul, um, um, uh, devotee to devotee. We're all helping each other get to that point. And we're also trying to bring this understanding to others too, because we can see that people are suffering in this material world, even if they don't think they're suffering. They're suffering simply by being here. And if we can bring this understanding to them as well, how much more does it please Krishna? And then, because we're part of Krishna, please us in being able to share this information. So, yeah. I have with me in the temple room today one of my new interns that joined us the day before yesterday, Taishia. Um, hi, hi. Do you have any? I know she's very new to all of this, so but she wanted to come to the temple this morning with me. So thank you for coming, being here. And I didn't know if that I was if it's kind of very kind of like being thrown in the deep end of a swimming pool. I don't know if you have any questions or if there's anything that you heard that you might want to have a little bit more information on.
Yeah, because
I will repeat what she says.
so the question on my mind now is that duality is body and spirit. But in daily life, I'm not in this. The daily life we see body and soul. So is soul and spirit the same thing, or are there any difference between soul and spirit?
So Tashi is asking that in daily life we hear body and spirit, right? And she's hearing now soul, body and soul, and so she's asking, is there a difference between the spirit and the soul?
Yeah.
No, that there may be in people's minds a difference within them, but from the Vedic point of view, the spirit and the soul are the same thing. So the soul, in Sanskrit, Jiva Atma is how the soul is the name for the soul, how it's described. And that is the spiritual essence, our spiritual essence, the soul, which is within this body. And so and so for so from a Vedic point of view, the spirit and soul are the same thing. It's that energy within the body that animates the body, that which gives life to the material body. Without the soul, without the spirit in the bodies are dead, is dead. So the difference between a living body and a dead body is that the living body has a soul, has a spirit inside it. Sometimes we also understand this concept in Christianity: God the Father, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost, or the Holy Spirit. And that is this energy, pervading energy of God that's everywhere and in everything. So that is we understand that as the Brahmin, the the Brahmin energy, this energy of God that pervades everything. So in the Christian concept, that is the Holy Spirit. And that energy also is part of us, but this as a tiny infinitesimal soul. So those are the only ways in which they could be confusing, but spirit and soul is the same thing.
Thank you.
So if there are no more questions.
Hare Krishna, good morning, Yashodamai. Thank you so
Haribol,
much.
Leela Kishore Prabhu, Jai, thank you for joining us.
What a wonderful class. And the past 3 days, it's all been so wonderfully connected also. And this is just like the top. I love when you brought up Archimedes, who actually said, Eureka.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
couldn't
he said, Eureka, I have found it, which was interesting because he didn't say I solved it or I created it or I discovered. He said I found it, which always to me seemed like the solution was there, right? Krishna always has the solution. He has all the answers. He just took time enough to seek and find it. And it's sort of the same path, right? We have to keep advancing, advancing, advancing. But I had a question about this in terms of Grihastha Ashram, and I'm so glad um, there are Vaishnavas on the call who are married and can perhaps speak to this, because I keep hearing, and not just in class, but all around, this idea that young mothers are going to struggle so much with their chanting and they may not be able to complete their chanting. And how will they, they're going to struggle, struggle, struggle. And then I hear, and when I went to those 2 beautiful weddings last fall, and we're looking forward to one coming up, you keep hearing that there is this, for lack of a better word, mission in the Grihastha Ashram to raise Krishna conscious children. And I sort of, the assumption is together, right? Not just one party doing all the raising. And so I was wondering if the men can talk about if their wives were truly struggling. And we are, you just said it, in the Grihastha Ashram, it is to support and serve one another in the service of Krishna and to advance. How does that husband help his wife to be able to have her sadhana time? Like, would that not be a way of serving? And is that the experience? Yes, my son is my responsibility, but in being married, aren't we, if one another's advancement becomes, I guess, sort of our responsibility is what I'm saying. So I'm just wondering, has that experience been like? And even further than that, in the community, I was raised in a very Christian community. When I had my first baby, there were old mothers, they call them in the church, who were kind of basically assigned to me, like to kind of make sure that I got my morning watch done, that I had my devotion time, and that I didn't, murder my baby because I didn't know what I was doing. So there's like, I'm just wondering, are those things in place to give one another service and also support these young mothers so that they can continue in advance? So I would love to hear from some of the husbands on the call who've been through that experience on how did that play out? And even mothers, you were a married woman in Krishna consciousness, how does that play out?
Hmm. Well, Taraka's hand is raised, so just before we go to Taraka, I would just like to say a quick thing, and anybody else too that would like to make a quick thing, is that sometimes when we look at the traditional roles of men and women, especially through the Vedic lens, we tend to think, oh yeah, women are in the house, like looking after the kids, and men are, off um, putting food on the table and working hard and everything. And that is a very kind of Western way of looking at things. I think in a more cultural way that there isn't, like you're saying, like the women come together and help the young mothers. I know in Gita Nagari, we were encouraged to have more of that kind of camaraderie sense, and that the women actually would cook for all of the new mothers in as they were experiencing that, and offer help in that way. As a mother myself, um, in a Krishna conscious marriage, I did feel as though it was kind of more but my burden to kind of raise the kids. But then that's also part of the conditioning that I think both of us were brought up in, and that in a truly egalitarian understanding that whatever help would be needed would be given, to whoever needed it at the time. So, like you said, if a mother needed time to go chant her rounds, whatever, it would be that the husband would step in to help in that respect. So that's kind of just knowing that there's limited time. That's kind of what I'm offering. Tarika Prabhu, if you'd like to share something, maybe briefly.
Briefly, challenge. Oh, thank you for your class. I always appreciate hearing your perspective on things, and you never fail to bring up a lot of very interesting points.
Thank you for being.
In response to Mother Leela Kashuri's question, my own experience is that from the beginning of my own marriage, I was encouraged by God siblings to understand the spiritual objective of the relationship, which is built largely upon the idea that husband and wife are a team. They cooperate together they help one another to progress. So whatever burden may be there of responsibility, it's shared. There circumstantially there may be issues that will mold the structure in a way that seems less shared. In my own case, I had to work very long hours, and I didn't really have a choice. So I much of the time I was simply not at home. I couldn't be there to share whatever work was required. When I was home, then I had to also be involved in trying to assist with whatever needed to be done. This is common sense. We're supposed to help one another. Sometimes it is practical to have a division of responsibility, but there is a pragmatic aspect as well, that no one should be overburdened to the extent that it is adversely affecting their health or their spiritual progress. The whole concept of marriage is based upon this idea that two people come together to help one another to advance in Krishna consciousness, to subsist, to survive, to raise children, whatever it means. The burden is shared somehow or other. We have to assist one another. Not that one particular party is going to be excessively burdened, but as I discussed in previous classes, the practical history that we have seen over many decades is that for a variety of reasons, women have had a hard time trying to complete their rounds once they have children. And it's not simply because they have a lot of duties and responsibilities, and perhaps they wind up shouldering a larger percentage of the work involved in raising the child. It's more than that. And I don't claim to understand all of what goes on. There are actually bodily considerations. The reports that I have heard from many women is that somehow or other, independently of the burden of work involved, the business of trying to complete rounds becomes more difficult. It may be a
Haripal
hormonal thing.
Prabhu, Hare Krishna, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but the datas are about to open. So we're gonna have to end class there. Thank you so much for your contributions. Thank you everybody for being a part of this. And Dasya Prem Prabhu, maybe next time you could ask your question. Okay, Krish Haribol Paluz. Oglosum, William Bull to Shilapapa. Oglos to Shichi Radha Damadav.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Gayanti Krishna 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 Hare Nam Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Blessed Dr. Vijay. Salve Dr. Vijay. You gotta go over the way. Oh, glory to the glory. Glory to the glory. Yes, no, glory to glory. Hare Krishna, glory to Shri Guru Guru, glory to Shri Prabhupada. Let us speak about spiritual master. It's the only way which we can take your devotions. I bow down to my Lord's feet of great holiness. By His grace, went across the ocean, material suffering, attained the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from His lotus mouth. Attachment to His lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, perfect birth. From Him ecstatic prema emanates, by Him ignorance is destroyed. Vedic scriptures in His care. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy. Friend of the poor, and Lord and Master of devotees, our Master is merciful unto us. Give us a shade of lotus feet, famous spread all over the world. His Divine Grace, I see Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you, dear devotees. And Hare Krishna. Have a wonderful, blissful day in Krishna consciousness.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna ki jai.